After how the Spanish Grand Prix ended, it seemed almost inevitable, almost poetic that George Russell and Max Verstappen would share the front row as we go into the next round. Whether there's going to be fireworks on the first lap of the Canadian Grand Prix, well, time will tell, but it was a sensational qualifying session in Montreal. We're going to go through everything with a very busy Saturday in the end with Tim Kraaij at GPBlog. Let's start with, well, let's not even start with the qualifying. Let's start with what's happened after the qualifying, Tim. Max Verstappen is not in a good mood. He didn't get pole position, not by much, but he didn't get pole position. And a little bit of anger coming out of him directed at Tom Clarkson in the press conference.
Yeah, you speak about fireworks more at the race, but we already had the fireworks after the qualifying, and not because of the magnificent qualifying that we saw, because I think... Let's start a little bit with that, because we had a fantastic qualifying with so many drivers close to each other, with 3-4 teams fighting for pole position. So I think that was very good to see, very impressive of George Russell to take the pole. But yeah, the interesting part was after it, Max Verstappen exploded during the press conference, and you could already see it building. And it was built in a very short time. But when the camera shifted towards Max Verstappen and his face, after that George did his first few questions with Tom Clarkson, you could already see it at his face, and it was like, okay, Tom, maybe you need to skip all the question that you had and just move to Oscar. But he didn't, naively or brave. It's a matter of point of view. But yeah, he tried. The first few answers of Max Verstappen were already a clear indication that he was not gonna give anything. It was one word, it was one sentence, and then Tom Clarkson trying to ask again about the penalty hanging above his head, the potential race ban with the 11 penalty points he has on his super license, and then the bomb exploded. He was talking about childish questions that he was being asked about this on Thursday. He really pointed it towards Tom Clarkson as well. He said, you asked this on Thursday as well. It's the only question we are getting asked here. It's childish. I'm not going to change anything, and I don't want to speak about it anytime longer. And he was really angry, and you could see really from his face. Later on in the press conference, another journalist tried again with Max. He wanted to ask Russell and Oscar as well if they would drive differently now that Max has a penalty, and he wanted to ask Max as well how he maybe changed. And Max was like full on rage and went back, put on two thumbs, and ignored the question. After the qualification, he seemed quite joyful with P2. He wasn't angry because of the P2, but in a very short amount of time, it went from there to the press conference. And I think it was a few points. One cheeky comment by George Russell, and then the question from Tom Clarkson. I think it was all a sum up of multiple things for Max.
Well, let's drill into that George Russell comment a little bit. Is this the psychological advantage, if you remember way back to Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg and their years fighting against each other? People used to say on Sky Sports, so he's got the psychological advantage. Is this George Russell coming out with these little cheeky comments after getting pole position about Max and where he's going to drive? Is that to try and get under Max's skin? Because Russell looked like he was, coming out fighting with his words a little bit, but in quite a bantering way.
Yeah, it felt like he was poking the bear a little bit. But you get a little bit more character from George. I think you can say that at least for him. The fans were a little bit two-sided as well with his reaction, because
Do you know what it was like, Tim? It was like when you tell a joke that's a little bit too soon.
Yeah, it was a little bit too soon, and you heard some booing, you heard some cheering, so it was a little bit mixed, and he was a little bit, I don't know, it felt a little bit like he was nervous about the fact that he made that joke as well. But yeah, I like it. It gives a little bit of edge. It gives us something to talk about as well after the session. It gives some fireworks beside everything that's happening on track, and I think it could be something that George and Mercedes overall are really trying to maybe find a weak spot in the big armor of Max Verstappen that doesn't show any weakness. But I think this is a recurring theme we've seen many times with Max in the past, where if it comes to questions about about his driving style, he really gets frustrated. And it all goes back from his starting days in F1 when he got all the questions about his driving style and if he needed to change. So it all stems back from that. He doesn't like to talk about changing his driving style because he doesn't want to. He doesn't change his driving style if he makes some crashes. He doesn't change his driving style because some people don't like his driving. And he is not going to change his driving style because of a potential race ban looming above his head.
It's been a hell of a couple of weeks from Verstappen and Russell. Seems to continue. But we're talking right now about Red Bull and Mercedes, and a lot of the conversation, well, this season has been on McLaren and this weekend has been on Ferrari, but those two teams, Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc, not looking like themselves and seem quite despondent almost after their qualifying. Lando half a second off his teammate and Leclerc having to abandon his lap basically.
Yeah, but to be honest, I don't agree with you in terms of not look like themselves because, yeah, Lando Norris looked like himself from the whole season so far, if you ask me. Again, in Q3, not finding the last bit, being very quick the whole weekend, but not tying it up together. And the first lap was, of course, the big mistake, not putting in a good banker lap. The second lap, he made a big mistake in the second sector again. Yeah, too far off. P7 with the McLaren. There's no excuse for that. And he was very critical of himself after the session as well. And I think this is where Oscar Wu had a really tough weekend. He wasn't good on Friday. He made an error today in FP3 as well with hitting the wall of champions. He didn't have a good weekend, and then to still come out on top, it's another win for Piastri. And with George and Max on the front row, I think Piastri will be looking to maybe get the benefits from that. But Lando, big job on his hands. P7, it's not easy to overtake on this circuit in Montreal. So it will be all, hoping for safety cars and red flags, because otherwise it will be a massive task for him. And then coming back to Charles Leclerc, we spoke about it yesterday. Big error there, which ruined his Friday. And I think maybe that all came in to bite him in the end in Q3, where he made a mistake in his final run. He was doing pretty good up until that point, where he was quicker overall still than Lewis Hamilton, even though he missed all those sessions. But in the end, it was not good enough with the error that he made. So he needs to, tidy that up again for the Sunday.
And finally, Tim, news somewhat broke after we spoke yesterday. The FIA making a bit of a change in the weekend about the stewards available, which was, it seemed a bit of a late decision. What can you tell us about why this has happened and the timing of it?
Yeah, very strange decision, or not maybe the decision, but more the timing of it all, because Derek Warrick, the FIA steward, did a lot of did a big interview with one of the gambling websites in the UK, something that we've seen Johnny Herbert doing in the past as well, for which Johnny Herbert was released by the FIS steward because they came to the conclusion that you can't combine being a pundit and being an objective FIA steward. So it didn't make sense. So I wrote a column about it at the start of this week. Before that column, I asked the FIA, why are you guys allowing this? Because it's strange that you first fire someone because of it and now allowing this. Up until now, we didn't get a response, but the response came in another way by still suspending the FIA steward, Derek Warrick. And like I said, the timing was strange because it was after FP2. Derek Warrick was already in Montreal. So he was doing all the work already there and now had to go home early because the FIA didn't read those comments earlier, or it doesn't really make sense. And George, after the qualifying, was saying that he was a little bit surprised by the decision because Derek didn't say a lot. I think the overall problem with it is that we still have a system in Formula One where the stewards of the FIA are volunteers. They get maybe a little bit of money, but that's all. And that is not up to standards of where F1 is. And if you see the figures Mohammed bin Sulayem presents that the profit FIA is making, you can have your doubts and think, okay, maybe it's time to use those funds to professionalize this type of FIA stewards, because the fact that they don't get paid for the role as a steward means that they need to find some other work as well. And as a former drivers, it makes sense to do pundit work like a lot of ex-drivers do, of course. So to get some money from those type of jobs is very reasonable. But I think the problem is not stewards talking to the media. The problem is the stewards not having enough finances from the FIA to make a normal living.
They have to go and speak to the media. Yeah, absolutely, Tim. A really good point. Hopefully we can just keep our conversation on the racetrack tomorrow. I am expecting fireworks, not maybe at turn 1, but at some point with those two drivers occupying the front row. Can't wait to see how it goes. But you've given us great updates as ever, Tim, on Saturday. And thank you very much for that. And thank you everybody else for watching.